And hello, Blade family. We've got a good one this week. I've got Mr. James Dominguez. James is class of 1989. He teaches in our social studies department, and he is our current head varsity basketball coach. Awesome guy. James bleeds blue and red, as you're probably going to hear in this interview, and I can't wait to talk to him. I think you're going to enjoy it a lot. As always, I love you guys, and let's see what Mr. Dominguez has to say for us today. So it is Saturday morning, October 17th. I've got on the phone with me Mr. James Dominguez. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Mr. Holland.
How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing well. I'm doing well as can be during this unprecedented time, but we're doing okay, as well as can be.
Good. So how's your family doing? I know you got a brother and a sister and your parents are around. How's everyone doing? How's everyone holding up?
They're holding up okay. My mother, father, my dad just turned 80 this last summer, and
Wow.
my mother's in her 70s. And so when this whole thing broke out, we took it very seriously because, they're at that vulnerable age. And
Sure.
so it was tough because, only seeing them through the window, dropping off food for them because, we don't know what's going on with the virus. But as we've isolated and kept, our small groups, it's been over the last few months, we've been able to hang out a lot more, and it's been nice to, become even closer than we already are. And the brother who he has three kids currently, and he has an older daughter who's in LA all by herself. And we've been lucky that nobody's been affected, health wise with the virus. And then my sister, before this virus all broke out, I moved her up to Seattle. She relocated, and she's living in Seattle with another Blade, Mike Blackwell.
Wow.
They're doing real well. He's got a real nice home up there, but everybody's dealing with it, and we've been just so blessed that none of us have contracted anything or had any scares, or because it's unprecedented times.
Right.
But
right.
it's the Zoom meetings have been interesting because before this we'd get together every once in a while, but then once the pandemic started, we're all isolated. We had our Sunday evening Zoom meetings with the whole family. And it was, since we're spread out, my niece is in LA, my brother's in Santa Rosa, my sister's in Seattle, my parents are here, but we weren't around each other. So it's brought us all a little closer, and, makes you think about what's really important. Is everybody
absolutely.
healthy? Do we have food? Do we have air conditioning? The basic things that, that really matter in life, because material things, all that stuff can go away, but, family's the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think you've had
How's
a chance.
your family? How is your family? No one ever asked you, how is your family? How's Kaylee, Karen, all the kids? How are they?
Well, thanks for asking, James. You had Kaylee her senior year. So, our eldest daughter, Kaylee, is a Blade. She graduated the class of 16, was valedictorian, and she's doing well. When this started, UC Berkeley shut down. That's where she was at. She was in her senior year. So she actually ended up here with us. She finished online, graduated on time. In fact, they just sent her degree to her. It just came in last weekend. Last Saturday. So it's official. Awesome. We were giving her a hard time. But her degree came in. She's got a degree in, I believe it's cellular and molecular biology.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I know. So she's been helping us, which has been great with her siblings as they do their distance learning. And she tries to, navigate what her next move will be. And we're glad that she's home. We literally, as soon as the lockdown started, my wife went up and picked her up, and then went back up a couple weeks later and moved her out of her apartment. And she's been here with us ever since. The rest of the kids, I have 6, so the rest of them are doing great. We've got 2 current Blades. They're doing great. We've got one middle schooler who is absolutely brilliant. All the kids are smart, but she's just brilliant. She's doing great. And then our twins are in the 4th grade, and they're doing great too. So
Yeah.
thanks for asking. We're all good.
No,
And my wife's
that's
amazing,
great.
you know.
Well, of course, you were smart enough to marry a Blade.
Yeah,
So,
that was my first right adult decision, I think, right there. So, yeah.
Oh, awesome. Awesome.
So every week we ask these 5 questions, James, and I know you've got stories. And last week, Tootie, which is what we call Mr. Art Gonzalez,
Yep.
Tootie mentioned your dad. So I know we're gonna get around to that and whether or not he's a better point guard and all the allegations made by
Well,
Mr.
no,
Gonzalez
we're
last
not
week.
going to get. We won't get into that because Duty can always dream. He can always dream, and I love Duty to death. He's always a good guy to me.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's awesome.
But no, when you want to talk about that, I have some background on the Marine Fitness thing because it was a real cool program.
Awesome.
So
yeah, hopefully we'll get into that.
Okay.
All right. So now I almost feel like giving the disclaimer that you have to your dad can't be the answer for this question, but if he is, it'll be cool too. So I'm just gonna leave it open like I do for everyone.
Sure.
All right. What teacher or staff member made the biggest difference in your EB high school education? And this is not a class. I'm asking about a specific person.
Sure. Well, like many of the other alumni have said, I was fortunate enough to go to East High during its heyday academically. We were California Distinguished School. We had amazing teachers all over this, in every department, and eventually all those teachers ended up either becoming principals or administrators or superintendents throughout the district. So I was really, really blessed to have a bunch of teachers. So I'm going to preface it with a couple of different people.
Okay.
So, of course, my father, he had the biggest impact on me, but it's not for what everybody might think. So my father, he was my PE teacher, he was my coach. I had to go home with him when I had bad days, but he taught me some lessons that I think every Blade that's currently going to East High needs to know, that nobody's going to give you anything just because of your name. And so he treated me like everyone else. If I didn't deserve an A, he wasn't going to give me an A. He wanted me to work and learn what hard work was. Okay. He wasn't easy on me. And so I am the man I am today because of him. He was my idol, but he was stern and tough, and he was very disciplined. The next 3 people had an impact on me because I came to East High. I wasn't supposed to come to East High. We lived in the Highland District, and my brother went to East. My sister went to East, and he played football and played golf, and my sister was a cheerleader and swam. And so the name, having my dad at East High, my mother working there in the 80s, my brother and sister, people knew me as I was coming in. But I only knew 2 kids coming to East High, 2 other students from Chipman. So I was going into East High with a target on my back, and the whole staff knew me, and me not knowing anybody. And the guy that really had a big impact on me and how I am a teacher today and how I deal with kids is Vernon Bell. Mr. Bell was an amazing teacher. And, I take a lot of the things that I do with my students because Vernon treated us a certain way. Okay. And for example, when we wrote papers and it had to be in, on a certain date, he would actually leave a box and he'd give us all his home address. And we had until 11:59 to put our reports in his box. And if you came at 12 o'clock and the box wasn't there, you didn't get any credit for it. But, how many teachers would give their addresses to all the students to say, okay, come by at my house? And he was just a good-natured man. And he was just, he was one of those guys that you just wanted to go to his class, but he was just a good person. Like I think it was Mr. Burrell had said, he was one of those guys that rules are there, but sometimes there are exceptions for certain circumstances. It depends on the situation. And so he had a huge impact on me. Education-wise, I'd have to say Jeannie Brashear, and a lot of people might not remember her. She was an English teacher as well. Okay. And I was a student that, I was fairly intelligent, but I was a horrible writer. And she had me in class, and so she had me tested for dyslexia. because I could verbally say stuff, and she worked with me until I worked things out.
Wow. Okay.
And she was just an amazing teacher. Eventually became a principal in the district.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have to mention this gentleman because of my background in We the People, David Richmond.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. David Richmond started the We the People program at East High. All the trophies in that trophy case, except the 5 I have, are David Richmond's. State, going to state every year,
Mm-hmm.
and just he really turned me on to thinking about government and doing reports on John Locke. And he was just one of those guys that got you fired up, and he wanted to, got you going to be excited about the subject matter. And those teachers, as well as a teacher that not a lot of people really, I think, remember, is Laurel Johnson, who ended up at Stockdale. She was a child that in a Japanese internment camp.
Oh wow!
And my junior year, her room was down in the Spanish wing, and back then there was no pacing and everything, and she really, made us understand what it was to be interned as an American. And so with those teachers, it kind of molded me into who I try to be in the classroom.
Wow, very good. Thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
The second question is the follow-up question. Now, what was your favorite class?
Oh, that's a tough one. I thought about that, all morning. And because I was a social person, I was in everything. I was in band, orchestra, I was in sports, I was in ASB, I was in clubs. I was kind of a social butterfly. And, I did okay in school, but I liked the social aspect of school, more so. I think I could have got better grades. And the class I really enjoyed going to, that I was fired up and it was fun every day, was PE. Okay. I hate to say it, but it was my PE class, my dad's PE class.
Okay.
And because you had to earn a grade every day. And so he had A courts, B courts, C courts, D courts, whether it was tennis, whether it was volleyball, badminton, and he'd divide up the teams, and you had to play to earn your grade every day, whether it was golf and all those things. That class was really, really enjoyable because, I considered myself an athlete, but there were much better athletes than me, like Terrence Manoy, who went to the Hall of Fame. And so you take the top athletes and make them the captains, and then it was fun. It was fun. So that was a class I really enjoyed going to. And I also enjoyed my fine arts, being in the band, getting to march down Flower Street, Quincy Street at 7 a.m. and waking up all the people in the neighborhoods, because we used to march the way down those
You'd go down the street back then?
Back then we would go all the way from the front of East High, and on a green light, somehow or another they worked it out, and we'd cross Mount Vernon and we'd go into the neighborhood because we used to march in the parades.
Oh, my goodness.
That was I just love being in band. I love the music, and I love the kids in there were great.
Sure.
We just really had a good time in there. And so those were some of my more enjoyable classes that, was the fine arts, because you got to do stuff. And so, but I'd have to agree with Ken Chapman that Larry Christensen's humanities class was probably the coolest class you went to.
Okay.
It was, so, I just love East High. So I don't think I had a class that I disliked, at East High,
cool.
So it's one of those things.
That's cool. Okay. I've never heard that the band actually marched out into the neighborhood until this conversation right now.
Oh yeah. Well, it was different times back then. I mean, and the neighborhood's still the same, but we would on Quincy, it narrows. Right. So imagine having an 80 to 100 person band, and you have all these kids making noise in the morning. And Mr. Ayala was my band director my junior and senior year, and Mr. Campbell was the director my freshman and sophomore year. And they said we were going to march because we were going to go to parades and we were going to do competitions. And we didn't think anything of it. Right. I think today would be a little bit different. But it was just really, really cool.
That's awesome. Okay. So what is your favorite high school memory?
Well, I would have to say that there are two.
Okay.
Okay. My first one is, you got to remember, the new gym was not built until my senior year.
Right.
And so prior to that, every game against the BHSs, the Souths, the Foothills, were played at Bakersfield College, and it was packed for all those games. And our playoff games were also up there. And I'd say my one of two would be being a sophomore on the varsity for playoffs and getting to go into the game against Tulare Western and getting to play on that big court and hitting a three-pointer at scrub time, because we had a great team, but getting to get out there and actually score in an East High varsity game in front of probably 3,000 to 4,000 people.
That's awesome.
The highlight, I think, for me is because my junior year we started construction on the new gym, so I was on the last basketball team to play in the old gym, and I was on the first basketball team to open up the new gym.
Oh, that's cool.
And the biggest thing was I was able to start, because I wasn't always a starter. I was able to start the inaugural league game against West High in the new gym, and we ended up winning that game. And it was just a great feeling to have our own gym that was that big, and we had a great team that year. And politics had something to do with it, but we had to play everybody at their gym, but we were tied with BHS for the league title, and the district made us. They said there were structural problems in the gym, which they never fixed it or changed anything, and so we had to play the last game of the season against BHS at BC, and ended up losing on the last second three-point shot by Mark Miniweather. Otherwise, we would have won the league title that year. But those would have been no. I mean, it was one of those games where it was packed house, probably 5,000 people at BC, and they barely beat us at their place. And we're like, great, we're going to beat them at our place. We hadn't lost a game in the gym. And a week before the game, the district said, well, we think there's some structural problems, so you can't play the game there. You have to go to BC. And so they made us move up there, and ended up.
Now, for reference, we haven't said yet. For reference, James, your class of 1989, and for everyone
1989,
right? For everyone who's been listening, I'm going through our staff, and I started back in the 70s, and I'm working my way through our staff that are graduates who still work with blades. James is next on the list, class of 1989. So, for reference, then. 88 was the last year that what we now call the old gym was the main gymnasium on campus. And then the big structure that we still refer to as the new gym opened your senior year. So at some point in the 88-89 school year, that gym opened up.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Exactly. So, and my life started at East High in 1974. Going to school with my dad and being in that gym. So
is that when your dad started coaching at East?
Yes. My dad came over to East when Ralph Crabby retired. He called my dad up and said, hey, you need to come over and take this job. You can do great things. And my dad was there. His first year was 74. And then he was there until 94. And so he culminated it with that state championship.
Now, at some point, I'm going to circle back around and interview some Hall of Fame members as well. Your dad is in the Hall of Fame.
He was in the first class.
Yeah. Before he started at East, he was at Burroughs, or is that right?
Yes. So back in the late 60s, early 70s, Burroughs was part of the current high school district.
Right.
And it's an interesting story, if you don't mind me saying,
sure.
Telling you about it. So my dad had a great team at Burroughs High School that ended up going to Southern Section Finals. And Ralph Crabby brought his team out to play my dad's team. And my dad had two big kids, about 6'7", 6'8", and Ralph had Milt Henderson, and who ended up following him as the head coach. And they were playing at Burroughs, and my dad's team was beating them. And it was so bad that Ralph even came over into my dad's huddle, and the officials had to move him out of the huddle because he couldn't figure it out. And finally just said, everybody get the heck out of the way and give Milt the ball. and Milt ended up winning that game against my dad. And, that's how great of a player Milt was. And so after that, Ralph Cravey ended up getting the job at Batesville College, and that's when he called my dad because he was recruiting a couple of kids to go to Batesville College. And so my dad came over, and, Ralph was right because we had some great talent there, and, my dad really worked hard at it, and, holds the record for the most wins in the school, so at one point he had the most wins in the section. So
I'm gonna hopefully circle around and get to chat with your dad about some of that. Milt,
yeah, sure.
Milt works for our school, and Milt will be one of our interviewees over the next couple of weeks. He was actually slated to be our second one, and we had to postpone it. So I will get Milt's perspective on things as well before too long too. But I love hearing your perspective on it too, James, because you're looking at this through the lens of a kid. All of it. I mean, you're looking at all of this through the lens of a kid. I mean, you got to watch your dad's first, 12, 13 years as a spectator, and then you got to play for him. So it's interesting to see, and obviously you got to be at home and raised by him too. So there's a whole lot of layers to it, but it's fun to hear your perspective on it. And I could tell, I know this, but people listening can tell also that how proud you are of your dad's accomplishments.
And Well, the East High meant everything to me, and that's why when I was supposed to go to Highland, I was like, "There's no way I'm going to Highland."
Right.
I'm going to East. Because I was in that crow's nest. That crow's nest in the old gym during the games most of the time with the camera guy until I was old enough to be a ball boy, and so that old gym was home. I mean, that was home, and then being able to break in the new gym as a player, and then coach with my dad through those 3 straight Valley titles, and breaking in the new gym with all those wins where it was packed beyond capacity. It was a once in a lifetime experience. I mean, I don't know if the city, because it's so big now and so many schools and we're so spread out that, we'll have something like that at that level where the other teams are bringing in future NBA players to East High to play against our team and us beating them. I mean, that's how good of a situation was. And I was able to be involved in that as an assistant coach. And, hopefully we can get back to where we're hanging some banners for boys basketball soon.
Yeah. Yeah. I clearly I hope so as well. So, now, I think you said you had 2 favorite memories. We got through the first memory. Was there a second favorite memory that I interrupted you?
No, that was one of them. Was the basketball part, and the other side was the ASB part. So my senior year, I was ASB vice president, and we were the 50th graduating class.
Oh, cool!
And like Art had told everybody last time, we played all our football games up at BC, and I was a finalist for Bobby Blade, and a good friend of mine, Craig Neville, was senior class president, and so we were kind of in charge of getting all the floats together and everything. And the floats had gone through, and then they're getting ready to announce the finalists for Bobby and Betty Blades. And my buddy Craig didn't contact anybody. And we ended up pulling the Corvettes that were there, bringing in the Grand Marshals. At the last minute, we talked to them, hey, can you drive us in as the 4 finalists? And, I think even though I lost, being a finalist for Bobby Blade was a big deal.
Right.
I think it still is.
It is, yeah.
But it was different back then because you had to be a member of a club. You had to be a member of a club. You couldn't be a member of sports. So you had to be a member of a club, and then the club had to nominate you. Then out of those folks, the faculty then interviewed you to see if you had all of the qualities to be Bobby or Betty Blade. And once you made it through that process, then they got to the Final Four. Then you were voted. They voted. My buddy Terry Minoy to be Bobby Blade, and he was more than worthy of it. But just the process of going from not knowing any of these kids coming from a Chipman Junior High where they most of them went to Compton and other schools like that, that they accepted me. And, that was probably one of my favorite memories was being, a finalist for Bobby Blade.
That's cool.
It was a pretty cool thing.
Do you remember which club nominated you?
I believe it was the Key Club.
The Key Club. Okay. And we still have, well, I think it's called Key Wins now.
Well, see, back then we had Key Club and Key Onettes. And so
really?
The boys were Key Club and the girls had Key Onettes. So there was two different service clubs.
Interesting.
And we had we picked one of their members to be our sweetheart so she could come to our meetings. And they picked one of us to be the Dreamboat. And so you had a crossover. And my senior year, I was the Dreamboat in the Key Onettes, their Dreamboat.
Wow.
And so I got to go to the girls club and, of course, all the smart, cute girls were there. So I was like, heck yeah, I'm going to that. And so it was, but the clubs and stuff it was a lot different. Like, the dances and stuff, and we all understand the difference now back then, but it was nice that every club got to have a dance. And, that was a highlight after a football game at BC is, hey, let's go back to the dance at East High. It's going to be fun. And it was really, really a cool experience.
That's cool. Again, that's you learned something. I have not heard that. I've heard of the Betty and Bobby nomination process before. That I was familiar with, but I did not realize that clubs did the dances. That's pretty interesting. Yeah, it's the fundraiser for the clubs, I guess, back then.
Yeah, and the ASB, the ICC Interclub Council, that we put on the carnival with now. They were the ones that decided, they drew it out. Okay, who gets the BHS football game? Who gets the West football game? Who gets and so they pick them out of the hats, and you were hoping that you got the big games, whether it's football or basketball, because there'd be a big crowd and you could make a lot of money at the dances. And so the ICC back then was really, it's an offset from ASB. It was its own organization.
Right. And
so the interclub councils, they decided a lot of stuff and they took it to ASB. Mm-hmm. And so it was back then we had to show up at 7:00 and there wasn't any zero period. And we had to show up in Bayless Hall for all of our ASB meetings. We didn't get credit for being in ASB. It was, voluntary. Hey, you voted into it, you're going to do it. And it was really a good deal. It's probably one of the things that I enjoyed as well was being an ASB officer.
I hope our ASB kids listen, our current ASB officers listen. It's pretty good to get that historic perspective.
Well, and the ASB just, it gives you so many lessons on how to work with bureaucracies and how to deal with adults. Yeah. And, been life lessons because I ended up being on ASBC and ASI at Cal State Bakersfield because of my experience at East High. I knew, how the system worked, and it's always helped me how to deal with people and how to deal with paperwork, how to deal with being told no and having to find other ways to figure out how we can do fun things at East High.
That's cool. Okay. Yeah. So that does roll right into the fourth question, the advice you would go back and give yourself before you started your freshman year. So what would that advice be?
Well, that advice would be don't be afraid to be uncomfortable. Okay. What I mean is when I went to East High, I was, unsure of myself like most freshmen are. And I knew I could compete in band and choir and orchestra and all those things because I had done those all the way growing up. But I was afraid to apply myself in other areas that I enjoyed. Like academics, I worked hard enough to get, do well enough to get B's, but I really didn't work as hard as I could to get A's. Right. Back then we didn't have social media or anything, so we'd have study groups and groups of us would get together, but it would end up being social. And the other study groups where they really drilled in it, those were your 4.0, your Julie Williams and your Terrence Benoist and Michael Potts, and these are all classmates of mine that really did well academically and went on to great things. But I just don't be afraid to be uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Get out of your comfort zone. Try different things, and don't try to impress everybody. Because I think I tried to get people to like me instead of doing what I needed to do for me. And I think that today, for me, if I would have done that, not worried about what people thought, maybe things would have worked out differently. But, I think it's just the wanting to belong that everybody has. And I think coming from another district into East High's district, that I wanted to be liked and to just, hey, be yourself. And people that like you are going to be your real friends. And the people that don't or make fun of you, they're not worth your time.
Right.
So don't worry about what anybody else thinks.
Awesome. Okay. And so how would you advise a student coming in now? What advice would you give that student?
I would give that student similar advice. I would say, hey, I would give the same advice. I think it's valuable for the kids to get out of your comfort zone. If you're good at, let's say, science and your friends aren't, try to challenge yourself. Take those courses, get into those science classes. Or if you're really good at math, apply yourself more, English or social science. I think we have so many bright kids at East High that don't think that they can't compete at the state or national level with other students. And with my experience with We the People and going to the nationals, we have great kids.
Oh, yeah.
That I think if they just apply themselves and work hard, and it's going to be hard, but take those gate classes, take those, honors classes, struggle a little bit, but it's going to pay off in the long run, because the kids that have done that, in my experience as an educator in general, they're able to go to MIT, they're able to go to Yale, they're able to go to Georgetown, Stanford, Berkeley, and it's just all about applying yourself. Don't worry about what everybody else thinks. Apply yourself and do what you want to do. Because when I was the We the People coach, that was the biggest thing that I tried to instill in our kids is they're smart enough to compete with anybody in the city or the nation.
Right.
And when those kids bought in, well, what happened? We went to nationals,
right,
and we were able to compete with the best students in the nation. And the kids realize that, hey, I can do anything I put my mind to.
Yeah.
And I think that our freshmen coming in need to know that, hey, you can do whatever you want to do in life.
Sky's the limit.
The limit. Just because the location of our school or whatever doesn't mean that you can't achieve whatever goal you want to achieve. We have outstanding teachers in every department. And I've been at 4 different high schools, and we have some teachers that really, really care. And caring doesn't mean being easy on you all the time. Caring for our students, they need to understand that when a teacher's hard on them, maybe it's because they think they see some potential in that student. So those incoming freshmen need to think about, well, are they getting on me because they don't like me, or are they getting on me because maybe I can do better? Right. And I think a lot of students think, well, they're just picking on me, when a lot of our more difficult subject matters at our school, the teachers really care, and they hold students to a higher standard, and the kids need to realize that, hey, they're doing this for a reason.
Right.
So, don't be so emotional if a teacher gets on you that, hey, you can do better. Well, my neighbor isn't doing well. Well, that's not what it's about. You're special. And every one of our kids is special. And so that would be my advice to our students, is get out of your comfort zone and, try to pursue your goals, because our kids can do anything. And it's amazing.
I agree. All right. And this is the big one. I know you're going to have something to say for this one, James. What does it mean to you to be a Blade?
This one, it's who I've always been. I mean, being a Blade means that I'm as good as anybody else. I'm always going to be the underdog, but we're going to show you that we're as good, if not better than you. And that's how I used to take it when I used to see teams compete, or when I was on campus, is that being a Blade is somebody you're going to have to work to beat us, because we're built a little different on this side of town. Yeah, we might not be the biggest. Yeah, we might not look like the best, but if you get to know us, you're going to find out that we're pretty darn tough, whether it's academics, whether it's athletics, that you're in for a fight, not physically, but you're in for a struggle with us if you challenge a Blade, because we're sharp like a Blade. We're quick-witted, and we're not going to back down from anybody. I mean, it's one of those things where there's a lot of pride in East High. Growing up watching being on campus and just watching how the students before I went to East High carried themselves. Very classy, didn't get into all the little stuff, but, when they went out on, whether it was on the football, basketball, soccer field, whether it was band competitions, that, we were going to surprise some people because we're pretty darn good.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's one of those things that, it means so much to me to be a Blade. Being at East High it's my dream job, because I spent a lot of years at different schools, and having the opportunity to come home and getting to work with my mom her last year at East High, that was something special,
Mm-hmm.
because it's one of those things. I got to come home. I got to teach what I love to teach with people. I got to, back in the neighborhood, back where I belong.
Yeah.
Because, the other schools are fine. I've had nothing but good experiences at other schools, but there's something special about East High.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that you have to be a Blade to understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a lot of fond memories of being a Blade. Whether it was Vernon Bell and my dad wrestling in the teacher's lounge and throwing shoes out towards your office, when I used to go down there as a little kid, they'd be in their prep period, and, Francis would tell you they'd be in there and Mr. Bell would be asleep. My dad would go in there and take off his shoes and throw them out in the hallway to mess with them, and he'd wake
That's
up and
awesome.
couldn't find his shoes, or, the Christmas parties or any of those things. I mean, it's a very, very special place.
Yeah.
I'm lucky to be there.
Yeah. Yep. Me too. All right, James, is there anything else that you want to share with our listening audience, the students?
Well, yeah, I wanted to get back to Thudi Gonzalez's marine fitness.
Yes. That
So
was
the
last week. For those of you,
Yes.
if you haven't heard last week with Tootie, listen to that one, and then come back and listen to this about marine fitness. This was something I had never heard of before, which is kind of rare. But every week I seem to learn something new, which is cool. Go ahead, James.
Well, you should know, because the marine fitness program started at West High School. They wrote a grant at West High School. And then my dad wrote a grant at East High School to set up a parquet course. And then Steve Strauss at South had a marine fitness class. They set up a parquet course there. And so basically it was a marine workout 5 days a week, where they did all the physical stuff the Marines did. And then they came together, those three schools, and they actually competed with the Marine Corps there to see who had the best marine fitness class. So each of those PE teachers had to write the grant. And
it was one of those. I have, until last week, I had never heard of that. So I don't know if it must have been an elective class, or maybe they even recruited kids at West for it. If it was competitive, I guarantee you they did.
Oh yeah, well, because my dad said West High had an amazing marine fitness class, and once he saw that and talked to, I believe it was Mr. Wren, I'm not sure if he was still there, PE teacher. They were at some department leaders, and my dad really liked it. He says, well, I want to do it at mine. And Steve Strauss over at South wanted to do it at his. And he said that they were some monsters. But then once my dad started getting those real good football players, wrestlers that we had at East High, and
Right.
they started digging it, that they figured out, well, we can do it just as well as them, just because they're at West High. And, in the 80s, West High was kind of the Stockdale school.
Yeah.
And so there was big competitions, and they, brought back banners from the Marine Corps, and it was, the kids really, really enjoyed it. And, but it was a high school grant that my dad wrote to get the parquet course, and it ran where the new gym was, but there were spots like on the outside the tennis courts, along the back of the football field, where the JV baseball field is. There was all kinds of different stations, whether it was dips, pull-up bars, different things that they went all the way around the school. And
Wow.
the course was a mile long. And it was a really, really, really cool thing,
Wow.
And so I wanted to touch on that. And then I got, if we have time, I got to talk a little bit about the state championship team, because I know you and Ken talked a long time about the Valley Championship football team.
Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
and that experience for me was, I had just stopped playing basketball at BC, and my dad wanted me to help him. And you have to know the background of this, that Milt, he actually wasn't in our district initially. Okay, he was he was in the South High district, and Milt actually moved his family to this side of town so that they could play for my dad.
Wow. Okay.
And so over the next 4 years, it was kind of one of those processes. The first year we got to the Valley, it didn't do as well. And I think that group of that young men are the only three-peat Valley champions in the school, maybe in the city, for boys varsity basketball.
That's hard to do in any sport ever.
Well,
that's hard.
And especially back then, because back then you have to remember Division II was based off of population.
Right.
It wasn't based off of records. So, Division II, you had to play against, the Ed O'Bannons and Charles O'Bannons that ended up being the NBA, the Jock Vance, who's the assistant coach with the Nets. And,
right.
That ride, I don't think a lot of people, the people that were there, because East Side people follow winners, as we saw with the girls varsity basketball this last year, when we have a winning team, whether it's football, basketball, people come out.
Right.
And, that experience with the varsity boys basketball, JR sophomore year, we won the Valley, and then we played Dominguez out of Compton, and we were down 20 with 2 minutes left.
Okay.
And came back and took the lead with 1 second left. And they hit a 3-pointer to beat us.
Oh, my
The next year, so we were out. And so the next year, we win the Valley again. We win our next 3 games. One was against Jock Vaughn, who went to Kansas, and it was a sellout crowd. And then we ended up playing Artesia in the finals at the LA Sports Arena. And, at that time they had Avondre Jones that went to the NBA, Charles O'Bannon, Ed O'Bannon. And once again, kids battle, lose by 3. So the next year, we got invited to all these invitationals. And we actually had an Adidas contract.
Okay.
The basketball program. The kids had to pay $1 because otherwise it would be illegal for the gear. They had to pay for it, but it was a minimum amount. And Adidas had us in all these national tournaments. But with district policies, we couldn't fly to Florida. We couldn't go to Texas, but we did go to, the Las Vegas one, where we played against Trajan Langdon, who played at Duke.
Oh, yeah.
And we played against Oak Hill Academy with Jerry Stackhouse, Sunshine Smith. I mean, they had 7 Division I players.
Wow.
And we ended up losing to them. And so we come back to the city. We win all the tournaments, and it's the first game in the league. And we lose the first game in the league.
Wow.
To Bakersfield High on the last second shot.
Okay.
And so the next day in practice, Terry Minoy calls my dad and said, "Coach, can I come to practice?" And he said, "Sure, come on to practice." And him and Sean Elijah and I believe Kevin Robinson, these were all teammates of mine. And they said, "Coach, can we take over practice?" Because it was the same system. And because, the pride we had in East High boys basketball, those guys got all over everybody's case about, "You guys have more talent, this, that, and the other thing. You should not lose another game." And they were, they're in their 20s, and they just got after them because they said, "You'll never have another opportunity. You guys can win state." And the next thing you know, we win every game through the end of the season because those old blades came back and talked to those kids because they were tired of listening to me and my dad.
That mentorship legacy stuff.
Oh, yeah. And they said, "You're not going to go out like that. You guys barely lost, and you didn't even play hard." And so they got into their tails. And the state championship was actually, I believe, the state semifinals, where we had to travel to the pond, and we ended up playing Paul Pierce in Inglewood High School.
Wow!
And they had a great team. I mean, we tried to run with them, and they Paul Pierce is going to be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And he ended up. We were down 20 at half against them. He was just going off, and my dad and I decided. I said, "Dad, what do you think about going to our matchup zone?" He said, "Well, it can't hurt." And so we did it, and they could not figure it out. And then we started coming back, got it to 10 by the fourth quarter, and by the end of the game, they couldn't deal with the complexity of the matchup zone. And then we had guys like Antoine Alexander, Chris Clayton, and JR, and Eli Anderson, Brandon Hankins just went off on threes, and we ended up beating them by like 15 points.
Wow.
So it was a 35-point swing. And, you know, at the end of the game, they interviewed Paul Pierce, and he talked about J.R. Henderson. He's the best player I've ever played against.
Wow.
You know, going into college. And then we ended up going up to Oakland where, you know, they had a big send-off in front of the school. And one of the RV places loaned us an RV to drive the boys up so the kids could relax all the way up to Oakland Coliseum. And we ended up going up there, and we had so many fans that followed up. And, you know, it's one of those things that I have clippings of me, my dad, and Eli, Emil Callahan, you know, who's come to our school to talk to the kids. He was on there, and you just see the joy that we were the best in the state. We ended up being a number 2 in the state of California, and I think we were number 10 in the nation that year.
That's awesome.
And, you know, it was just one of those rides that, you know, I don't think a lot of people, because times have changed, and it was a lot more difficult. Not saying it's not difficult today, because I coach today, but it was just a lot different because if you were a 2,000 person school, you played with the 2,000 people school. Right. It didn't matter. And, you know, I think now it's better for some groups of teams. Like, we're going to take advantage of that this year, being a Division 4 school, and we're going to use it to our advantage. But back then it was just a lot different. You know, nothing against these other schools that have won state championships, you know, but it was just a different thing. And I don't think that there's going to be there's going to be another team that is as good as the Blades in 1994. And I'll put that team up against anyone, you know, because a lot of people that know basketball knows that that's probably the greatest team in the history of the school, if not the city. So
that's cool.
Got to talk about that team.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you were there. So it's fun to hear.
And you don't realize it when you're there because you're just in it. And looking back, it's like, that was unbelievable.
Well, I mean, my wife didn't play any sports. She was a band debate person.
Mm-hmm.
And she graduated in 93. But she was right smack in the middle of those Valley championships that you're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and so she missed the state championship by a year, but was able to be involved in that tradition that started finally like solidifying. I think over the years, you know, going back to Ralph Cravey coaching at East, East has just been a dominant basketball program. I mean, that's just part of our culture at the school. I think I said that when I was talking to Chapman the other day.
Mm-hmm.
But that state title in '94 and I think the one last year too. There's some a lot of pride in that. And my wife just being there at the school while that was beginning to formulate. She talks about it every year when basketball season starts and I start hanging out at the school in the gym to watch us play. I hear some memory of hers about what it was like being there in the early 90s for basketball.
Oh, yeah.
So I know it's a big deal. It was a big deal for everyone. Everyone on the east side of town, everyone involved in East High.
Oh, sure.
Alumni, everyone. It's a huge deal.
Well, and what Bobby did last year, bringing back the pride, you know, and what the girls did, you know, if people thought that was great, because it was amazing. It was amazing. But imagine that where there are still 1,000 people wanting to get in, as far as how big the crowd was, because those were great crowds for our side. You know, I hope we can start getting more people in for the boys' games, but, you know, we got to win some games to get them there. And but having that place just packed, it is a home court advantage that like none other.
So,
you know,
it's funny you say that. One of my first East High fondest memories, actually, as a Blade, is I was appointed to be the cop there mid-year, my first year in the high school district. So I moved over to East in January of, I think it would be 2005, I think. But basically, basketball season was kicking off. And I can remember the gym being pretty full, but the basketball fans there were led by football players who were not 2 or 3 sport athletes.
Oh, yeah.
And they'd sit in the front row and have their chests painted and wait for me to step out of the gym to yank their shirts off and just wreak havoc. And the environment was hilarious. They thought I was so mad at them, and it was something else.
And that's a tradition that actually started back in the 80s, because my brother didn't play basketball. He played football, so he'd get all his football buddies in the old gym, and they'd all show up, whether it's with bags over their heads or newspapers, and they would get so rowdy and end up, but the football team, just because they would always go to the games.
Right.
And they would always support their friends that played basketball. And, you'd always see the other sports teams coming to those games, just like, my basketball team goes to the football games and, tries to support the other groups. Right. But it was nice to see, hey, just because I'm not on the team, we're not competing against each other, football, basketball, soccer, wrestling, whatever. We're all Blades. Right. So we need to work together and support each other, especially when it's a big game, to help each other out. But, that's been something at East High. I can remember my senior year, we had a pretty good football team, and I wasn't in band anymore, and we were rowdy in the stands for the football games, because we were Blades. We supported all each other.
It was a heck of an environment. It was very positive. It was very fun.
Oh yeah.
And I loved it. And those kids, I was the cop, so I had to make sure I kept it under control. And I had that command presence thing, had my mean face on and everything else. And I'd step out into the foyer and just crack up. Those kids had me laughing so hard. It was so fun.
Well, and I think that's the problem with today is kids don't know that they can still have fun without breaking rules.
Right.
There's a right way to do things. And I think that's missing, that these kids need to go and have fun, but be involved in the games in a positive way, that you can do shout outs versus the other school as long as they're appropriate, and get into it back and forth. That, I don't think, I almost want to, have a class on through leadership. Yeah. Through leadership on, hey, leadership, let's teach them some cheers, some appropriate cheers, and get them for every sport. And, that's what they used to have a rally club for. Yeah. Back in the days, they'd have a rally club, and it wasn't for the school rallies. It was to rally around the teams and do those things. Yeah. And so.
Yep. Well, I tell you, James, it's fun talking to you. It's such a great tradition at East High in every way, and a lot in basketball for sure. I mean, I thank you. I enjoy hearing your perspective. I always learn something, it seems like, when I talk to you guys. So. Well,
I could talk for hours about East High. You know me, I love it.
Yeah, me too.
And it's home. It's been my home since 1974. I had a little hiatus when I first started teaching, but it's red and blue, like Thudi says. Red and blue runs in these veins, and I'm always going to be a Blade. I don't care. I love our school, and it's a pleasure to be there and a pleasure to teach our kids.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for your time on this Saturday. It's now afternoon. It's Saturday afternoon. I appreciate you, Mr. Dominguez, and I'm going to hit the stop button and let you have the rest of your Saturday to enjoy with your family. So take care.
I appreciate it, Leo. Thank you for everything you do for all of us. I really appreciate everything you do for all of us.
I love it. Love the place. Love you guys.
All right. Have a good one, Mr. Bye.
Bye-bye. That was exciting. Hearing about a state championship is always amazing to hear. Class of 1989, but as he said, going back to 1974, when your family is faculty, when your parents faculty, obviously, you just grow up a Blade, and being able to come to the school obviously was something important for James, and it was fun to catch up with him. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Hey, listen, Blade Family Reunion is a labor of love for me, but it's also a labor to raise a little scholarship money for our kids so they could do some summer programs and have some scholarships for some of our students who win principal's awards at the end of the year. If you feel so inclined, please get a hold of our finance office and donate. We'd love to get your support for their students to further their academic enrichment and to get a little college money. Take care, Blade family. Till next week. I love you guys. Go Blades.